In Pit Lane, proudly brought to you by Online Invent, websites, digital marketing and custom software.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of In Pit Lane. Well, coming up this weekend at Sandown Raceway, we've got the Motorsport Australia Championships, and part of those championships will be the Australian Production Car Championships. Production car racing, of course, a rich history in Australia. The whole legend of the Bathurst 1000 and long distance racing at Mount Panorama began with production cars, and there's a group of people very much wanting to keep that tradition alive, and we'll be talking with Troy Williams from the Australian Production Car Championship a little bit later on in the program. But it's a really quick introduction to my mate Craig Doc Gladego. And Doc, a busy weekend once again.
Massively busy for you, massive multitude of local motorsport, and huge, and we must move on. So
Indeed we must, and we're going to move on by saying it has been a big weekend in motorsport. It's been so big we're going to have to split the news into two pieces this week, and we're going to start with part one of the In Pit Lane Motorsport News.
News this week that the Melbourne Jamboree scheduled for Heathcote Park in October has been postponed to a date to be fixed. Melbourne's wet spell has forced delays to improvement work at the track. But last weekend, it was a trip down memory lane for drag racing fans at Heathcote Park, as Heathcote Park played host to the Nostalgia Nationals. It wasn't the biggest turnout of cars, or fans for that matter, but everyone there had a ball as the sport's local history was celebrated.
The weather looked threatening, but the rain stayed away and there was no shortage of cool cars at the nostalgia drags at Heathcote Park. Cars of the past and cars in the style of the past put on a great show for the crowd who braved the elements. There were plenty of legendary cars and drivers on hand, like the Bushman, a Holden-powered Altered that I remember watching in black and white on Channel O back in the early 1970s. Also, the famous Harrop's Howler, which is once again owned by the man who built and raced it, Ron Harrop.
It's something that I didn't think I really wanted back, but a good friend of mine suggested I ought to get it back. He twisted my arm behind my back and said, "You really need to do this." So on his say-so, I decided I should do it. So, yeah. Originally, I had an EH that I drag raced out at Kohler, and the Moore brothers came down from Sydney and they had an FJ Holden, and my EH was doing about 14 dead at the time, and they had an FJ that was doing 13.7. And I was in awe of this car doing 13.7. I got talking to them and they suggested that if I put my engine and mechanicals in an FJ, it'd probably go as quick. And I said, "Oh, do you think so?" So I said, "Oh, yeah." So I ended up buying a car off Murrumbidgee, which was a trade-in, which is this car here, and it was $29. Put the engine and gearbox and diff in it, and the first run of the meeting I did a 13.7, and by the end of that first meeting I did a 13.43, so I've got the Moore brothers to thank for the good advice they gave me. Originally it was a 179 engine, and then I got the crankshaft and got the MIG welder out and MIG'd up the big ends and ground it offset, welded counterweights off, carved off the counterweights with the oxy torch and made it into what looked pretty right. And it just got better and better, and towards the end I think we had 343 horsepower at 7,800 revs. So, and ultimately the best time it did was 11.8 actually, that's 52 years ago.
But the most unique car there, in fact quite possibly the most unique Aussie drag car ever built, is this twin-engined all-wheel drive dragster known as The Thing.
Well, it's a dragster run in BD class in 1968 or 9. It's got 2 Holden grey motors, and one drives the front wheels and one drives the back wheels. And there's a bit of a nightmare of linkages, but all the gears and clutch and everything works. So yeah, and in '69 I got married, and then we had kids and money run out, and anyway we didn't use it anymore, so I stripped a lot of the good bits out of it, and a fella took the frame away, and 50 years later my son found it on Google and we bought it back. I always reckon if you've got wheels, you may as well have each one driven. And you know, I've always had 4-wheel drives before and after that, even today. So yeah, traction. That was the idea.
An emotional victory for Shane Van Gisbergen as the New Zealand driver took out his final supercar race win at the historic Pukekohe circuit in Auckland. After struggling in Saturday's first race, which was won by a dominant Will Davison, Van Gisbergen stormed back on Sunday to win both races and take out his third Jason Richards trophy. Speaking after the race, Van Gisbergen said that the win was even better than winning the Bathurst 1000. The final supercar event at the famous circuit attracted a huge crowd, who also saw an emotional win to Greg Murphy in an historic touring car support race. The future of supercars in New Zealand is now uncertain, with the Tony Quinn-owned Hampton Downs track the most likely to replace Pukekohe.
This weekend's basketball historic meeting is shaping up as one of the biggest events of the Tasmanian motorsport calendar. Close to 300 cars evented, with touring cars of the Group C and A era the featured attraction. Apart from a large number of local cars, there are many mainland machines making the trip across Bass Strait, and some of them were getting ready last week in Melbourne.
It was a hectic Friday afternoon last week at the Elfin Heritage Centre in Moorabbin as cars were prepared for the journey across Bass Strait. Several famous Elfins are making the trip on board the historic Elfin Transporter, including Mark Goldsmith's Big Banger Elfin 400 Ford, the Streamliner of Dan Jeffries, and Richard Nitschke's Elfin 300. The Elfin Heritage Centre is a labour of love by Bill Hemming to maintain and celebrate the history of Australia's most successful local racing mark. Hemming himself will not be in Tasmania though. He left Australia the following day to race at the Goodwood Revival and the Spa Historic. In Pit Lane will be at Baskerville though to film a special edition of the show to be seen on C31 Melbourne and the In Pit Lane YouTube channel on November 3rd.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Now, we'll have Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR and WEC news in our international wrap coming later in the show. But when we come back, we'll be joined by the category manager of the Australian Production Cars Championship, Troy Williams, to talk about this weekend's round at Sandown. You're watching In Pit Lane on C31 Melbourne and on demand on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Get the phone ringing for your business with website development and SEO services from Online Invent. Visit onlineinvent.com.au.
And once again, of course, we're In Pit Lane and RMITV Student Television would like to thank Online Invent for their support of community television here in Melbourne and in Pit Lane. So when they're ready in the next studio in the control room, we'll come back and we'll start this second segment.
While they're lining all the ducks up in a row, the other thing
Are there ducks in there?
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder what the smell was.
No geese, just all ducks. On one thing, Roy is a massive motorsport fan as well too. He is a tragic, and he that's why
we'll let you know. We'll let you know if you go onto YouTube. Roy's got his own YouTube channel called Motorsport Archive. And I've given him a lot of old things that I taped off of the television, like 30 years ago or more, and he's remastering those, putting them onto digital and uploading them onto his site. He's also got hold of a lot of the old In Pit Lane programs, and we're going to be putting those up on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel very soon, including our visit to the Goodwood Festival of Speed. First time I have seen that particular.
I was going to say, have you had a sneak peek at some of them yet?
I have had a sneak peek because I haven't seen. Have
you ducked into that?
I haven't seen that footage for the best part of 18
8 months. 10.
So it was a great trip down memory lane when
good.
Melissa and I went across
Thank
there.
you, Roy.
So very important to me. So we keep watching on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. Okay, I believe that we're right to go back. So when we're ready for the second segment, we'll move into that. So when you're ready, Anthony, let us know what's happening, and we'll dive into it. Welcome back to In Pit Lane. Well, as I said at the start of the program, the history of Australian motorsport, particularly in terms of the popularity of touring car racing, was really set in the 1960s and early 1970s with production car racing at places like Bathurst, Phillip Island, the Sandown 500, or the 4 hours it was then before it became the 250, and then it became the 400 and whatever. Production car racing is very popular, or was very popular back in the day. There's a group of people who are keeping that passion alive, and of course their big race every year is now the Bathurst 6 hours, and they'll be in action this weekend at Sandown as part of the Motorsport Australia Championships. And to find out about production car racing in Australia from the Australian Production Car Championship, it's Troy Williams. Troy, welcome to In Pit Lane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's just talk about production cars. I mean, there is a real passion. I mean, for the people who are involved, that, they absolutely love this stuff. And it's almost sort of, that they're not going to let go of this. They really believe. Why are production cars and production car racing, why is it still relevant in this day and age?
It's a good question. And I think a lot of the cars are accessible to us as consumers in Australia. We identify with what's in the track. What's on the track. And the old adage, used to say at Bathurst, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. So I think that accessibility and the perception that there's a link between what I drive every day and what's going around on the racetrack, I think from a spectator perspective, that makes it attractive. From a competitor's perspective, it's a challenge. Getting a production car to last that long, 6 hours at Bathurst is a long time for any vehicle, let alone a car that's used to being driven around on the road. But your stalwarts like, Berwick Linton still runs with us, the Sharon family, for example, long-time supporters of production car racing. And I think, we'll see them in the sport for a
So
long
when
number
we
of
say
years.
production cars, I mean, the thing was that it used to be almost literally drive off the showroom floor and there. What can you do to us? I take, I go and I pick up my car, my BMW, my Suzuki, whatever level I'm at.
Yes.
What can I do to that car under the current regulations?
In short, not a lot. You can add safety equipment, so your cage, fuel cell, things like that. There's a recognition document for each model of car that Motorsport Australia produce, and that tells you, the size of the rotors, what brakes you can run, all of the specifications. So your key componentry must stay true to as it was produced from the factory, but add some safety equipment in, obviously, to keep the drivers safe, and that's about it.
Thanks for the escalator, Brett. Perfect, because you were just saying what you can and can't add, and Brett asked a very pertinent question, especially with those cars. But recently we had a change to the regulations. It's gone back a little bit because it was a controlled tyre a while ago, and then years before that it wasn't controlled. Yep. This year we've got a new panel of tyres again, haven't we? So that gives them the option. I think it's Hankook's, Yokohama's, Dunlops and MRFs. There's 4 panels this year.
Correct.
Has that broadened everyone's horizons a little bit, Troy?
Yes, it has. And I guess, so myself and Carl Begg took over the category earlier in the year, and what we wanted to do was sort of bring it back closer to the competitor, give the competitor some choice in what they use on track, and tyres was a good example. So yeah, between those 4 brands, some brands suit different cars a little bit better or different circuits, but you've seen, we've got 33 cars this weekend at Sandown. So I think, there's a lot of interest in production car racing, and some of those changes have meant people have come back to the national championship
Record number,
level.
isn't it? I think for your Sandown meeting for you, 33?
Yeah, it is indeed, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
The other thing, I mean, you mentioned the 33 cars, but that's not just sort of, it's not like the homogeneous sort of thing in supercars where they're all basically, 2 models and that's it.
Yes.
You've got all the different categories. So where do the categories fit in? And I mean, what sort of cars can we see? Where do we start? What's our sort of, our baseline, go up to the cars that are running for outright?
Sure. So your outright cars are dominated by Class X. So BMW M3s, M4s, GTS Commodore. Then you've got your Class A's, so Mitsubishi Evos, 4-wheel drive type vehicles, which with the weather we're expecting this weekend might contend for outright as well. As you work back through the field, Class B traditionally is your domain of V8 Commodores, cars like that. Class C, we've got a number of entrants, so Astras, BMW 130i hatches, The Hyundai i30N is in there, right through back to Class E. Suzuki Swift, Al Jarvis is leading Class E at the moment in the championship. So something for everyone there.
You've been running this category for about 3 years now,
Yep.
but you also didn't have ownership at one stage. You have taken that over quite recently, or a
Yes.
little while ago. So you had that ability to look at the category and look at the racing, etc. beforehand
Yep.
and think, right, this is where someone else has owned it and I had the reins, now you own it and done it. What have you been able to probably gain from that experience beforehand and now implement even further and develop the category even better as for the production cars?
I think from my business background and also a sporting background, I always listen to my customers very intently. And at the end of the day, as they say, customer is king. So I think just listen to your customers with intent and interest and then deliver a product that they enjoy.
What about one of the arguments about production cars? I mean, in the past has been, you've got a situation at the moment like at the Bathurst 6 Hour and in racing. You mentioned the BMWs before. The BMWs are certainly the car to beat right now. With the changing landscape of the general automotive, automotive market at the moment,
Yep.
with SUVs and electric cars and all the rest of it, where does that fit in the future? I mean, do we have a problem that we're going to have something where it just becomes Formula BMW? If you want to win, you've got to have a BMW, one of the M series, and that's it. Or how do you sort of encourage other cars, other manufacturers, and other drivers into that series?
I think there's sort of two questions there. One about EVs, SUVs, but then also the class structure. Like if you look at the 6 Hour as the aspirational event, there's people that will go to the 6 Hour to win their class. Like the great Bathurst races in the day, it was about winning your class, not just outright. And you can still do that with a good budget, or a fair budget, I should say, a class car, and still aim to win, stand on the podium at Bathurst in your class. So you don't necessarily have to, be in an M3 or an M4 to get all the glory. Having said that, if you want to be up the pointy end of the field, it is your Mustangs, your HSVs, and your BMW M product. On electric cars, that's an interesting question. We haven't really seen any guidance yet from Motorsport Australia around how they're going to handle electric cars. The biggest issue is really around circuit infrastructure. So first of all, the circuits need to be able to cope in a risk management and a safety sense with a car that is powered by a very different power source. Keep the competitors, officials and spectators safe. So I think once MA answered that question, then in a sporting sense, we can start getting our heads around how we incorporate EVs into our sport. Just
quickly, we're going to take a break, but balance of performance, that dreaded word. I mean, is there any sort of balance of performance that you can bring into this to try and keep the show sort of more attractive to the audience?
You could, but at the moment, I think we're getting some great racing as we have it now. So I wouldn't be messing with the formula too much.
Okay.
Are you on a quick note,
okay,
Dan?
very quick.
Quick note, half an hour or 1 hour, because you've gone from the last couple of years. A lot of people like the long endurance ones, and you've gone to some short bursts. What's the feedback coming from the teams at the moment?
Heritage of the category has always been endurance racing.
Okay.
So 100% endurance racing.
Okay, we will catch up and find out what's happening at Sandown this weekend in just a moment. You're watching In Pit Lane. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so I've just been told we're pretty much right on time, so that's nice. So yes, so coming up at Sandown, of course, we've got the Motorsport Australia Championship. Sandown, as we said, the longer race. We'll talk about that. But why do you think this was so popular? I mean, suddenly that this huge field that you've got all of a sudden.
33 cars.
33 cars
Yep.
that came out. I mean, I was surprised when I had a look at it. I mean, because we've had in the past these things that aren't the Bathurst 6 Hours or aren't one of the major sort of enduros,
Yes.
and yet there's a huge turnout.
I was wrapped when I saw 30, and now it's 33 suddenly. Yeah.
Yeah, we started with 20 round one, about 25 at Queensland Raceway, and now 33 for Sandown. So I think Sandown, a lot of competitors aren't sure when they'll get an opportunity again to run at Sandown, unfortunately.
Yeah, 2027 still thereabouts.
Yeah, so, but then as a category, are we guaranteed to
never
get
know where
back
you might
there
get
next year?
shoved. Yeah, you might get shunted
Well,
off the track.
hopefully not. But so yeah, I think there's some appetite there just for nostalgia's sake, and while we can get a run at Sandown. So I think a lot of people have turned up.
Oh, that'll be great. So when we're ready, so we're in the control room. When we're ready to go for the third segment, we will get that. We'll have the international wrap. Just a reminder, I will give it a plug, but full course yellow coming up. It's going to be a very quick full course yellow this weekend because
you're going to where? You're going to somewhere even colder again.
Yes, I believe
Freezing.
it was actually
He's going snow skiing.
I'm going.
Brett's going snow skiing down Tasmania.
So there you go, full course yellow live on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel and on Facebook.
Borrow your jacket, please. Yeah, the one that you've just brought down from Queensland. Brett needs to borrow it.
Welcome back to In Pit Lane on Channel 31 and on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. Now, of course, in the United States and Europe, where they've actually come to the realisation that motor racing is in fact a summer sport, the season is dying down and series are being wrapped up. A few of them wrapped up on the weekend. Let's find out about that in this week's In Pit Lane International Wrap.
The seemingly inevitable march of Max Verstappen and Red Bull towards the 2022 World Championship continued unhindered on Sunday as the reigning champion won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Starting from sixth on the grid due to a technical penalty, Verstappen once again sized his way through the field to win the race from Charles Leclerc and George Russell. The race ended under a virtual safety car after Daniel Ricciardo's McLaren failed with only one lap to go. Ricciardo had run as high as third early in the race and was set for a top 10 finish before yet another blow in what has been an absolutely miserable year. Congratulations to Australia's Will Power on winning his second IndyCar title. A third place in the final race at Laguna Seca was enough for the Queenslander to take the win, his second title after winning in 2014. Alex Palou won the race ahead of Power's teammate and main championship rival, Joseph Newgarden. Scott McLaughlin was sixth. A mixed weekend for Melbourne driver Hugh Barter in the latest round of the French F4 Championships at Lebanon. Barter won the first race before storming through the pack to take second in the reverse grid race. But a win to main rival Alessandro Giusti in race 3, with Barter second, has kept the title fight close, with Barter now leading by 35 points. Second Korea NASCAR Cup Series victory. Wallace now becomes the 17th different driver to win in what has been a wide-open NASCAR season. He beat home Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell, who becomes the first of the playoff drivers to advance into the round of 12 in NASCAR's confusing artificial football-style final series. And a home track win to Toyota as the car of Le Mans winners Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley and Ryo Hirakawa took their second win of the 2022 season. It was a 1-2 for Toyota, with reigning champions Mike Conway, Kamui Kobayashi and Jose Maria Lopez second. Things were much closer in LMP2, with Sean Galil, Robert Frines and Dries Van Thorn narrowly taking the victory, after the race-leading Jota Orica was forced to take a quick splash and dash for fuel with less than 5 minutes remaining. The GTE Pro category was won by Ferrari, with reigning champions Alessandro Piaguidi and James Collado now one step closer to becoming three-time champions in the class.
And thank you for watching In Pit Lane this week. We'll be back next week with more on the program. But Troy, just quickly, this weekend, what are we going to see at Sandown? Why should people go and when should they go?
I think go all weekend. Going to see some great racing across all of the categories, Trans Am, Porsche, production cars. So great for spectators. And I think with a bit of weather mixed in, we might see some unusual people up the front of the race. So it should be a great spectacle for everyone.
One quick curveball. Do you wish you were still back in the car like in those 2015, 2016 muscle cars that you were driving in the Masters?
Yeah.
Do you miss it?
Every now and then I've raced a 64 Mustang. That's probably been my favourite so far, but one day we might get a chance. But for now, the hands are full with running APCs. So.
Got the cap on.
Yeah, that's right.
Be great to see with the helmet on again one day.
Well, thanks for coming down. Troy made a special trip, came in down early from Queensland to join us. Thanks for joining us. Best of luck with the Australian Production Car Championship. Of course, the Bathurst 6 Hour. Looking forward to perhaps making it up there myself next year. It's got really good vibes there. But for now, Troy Williams, thanks for joining us in Pit Lane.
Thank you, no problem. Thanks, mate.
And thank you to you at home for joining us once again. Now, you might have sort of noticed if you've seen on any wide shots, we don't have a band alongside us this week. That's because our band this week, our musical act, rang us about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and said, hey, guess what? I'm in hospital. So, but we're going to take you out with music anyway, because a couple of weeks ago we had a very special edition of In Pit Lane. It was a special online-only edition, so you haven't seen this on Channel 31, but you can see it on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. Our special guest was Valentino Astuti, and also our musical guest tonight, that's Alicia Francesca, and she's going to take us out tonight with her song Thought I'd Never Miss You. So until we see you next week here on In Pit Lane, this is Alicia Francesca and Thought I'd Never Miss You. Good night.
You didn't want to know me back then. Never once did you say you were my friend. So